Hello, my name is Claudia Tornquist. I'm the president and CEO of Kodiak Copper. I'm here with Chris Taylor, the founder and chairman of Kodiak and a geologist. And Kodiak is focused on copper porphyry exploration in North America. Our main project is MPD in southern British Columbia, where we made a discovery in 2020, just about 18 months ago, discovered the gate zone, which was a real game changer for the company and enabled us to raise $12.7 million. And that made for a very busy year, 2021, where we drilled 22,000 meters almost, and we're very successful in extending the gate zone. And now this year we are drilling again with, a larger drill campaign, 25,000 meters planned. So lots of excitement, lots of drilling, lots of results to come this year.
Claudia, thank you very much for the introduction. Nice to see you again. We've shared a panel on a porphyry webinar about a year ago. And Chris, nice to meet you. It's the first time I've spoken to you. So good to meet you, and congratulations on Great Bear, great result last year. And I see that you're wearing the shirt of a geologist as well, which is always good to see.
That's right. It's good to keep the narrative plain and simple. People will remember that I'm a geologist as long as I'm wearing reddish plaid.
Yeah, good stuff. So Claudia, a year ago, in fact, I remember really clearly 2 years ago when you first announced that you had hit it was the alteration style. It wasn't even, it was 6 months before you hit the actual mineralization at the gate zone, but I think it was in February or March 2020. You were into a porphyritic system. I can't remember whether it was propylitic or some kind of argillic alteration. You had all of the signs there, and then you went in and you made that discovery. So congratulations to the team. You said you're drilling 25,000 meters this year and you're expanding the gate zone, but could you just, for my benefit, just remind me where it is and kind of, a little bit of the exploration history on this area. I'd perhaps share a map, just kind of North America, Canada, MPD, just a little bit of background would be great, please.
Okay, let me bring up a map that shows the location of the project. We're in southern British Columbia, not even a 3 hours drive from Vancouver, in an established mining area with lots of other mines, projects in the vicinity. We're between two large copper mines. To our south is Copper Mountain, which is also quite a close geological analog. And then to our north, about 50 kilometers away, is Teck's big Highland Valley copper mine. So very established mining area, which is of course fantastic because it makes for very cost-effective exploration. Project is also very accessible, just off the highway. You turn off the highway onto a logging road and you're there in a couple of minutes. So very good for exploration, makes it very easy and cost effective. And of course, looking into the future, that will also be a big difference maker for the project. So very fortunate where we are.
And you describe Copper Mountain as an analog. Does that mean it's also a porphyry and same age?
Chris, you're probably best placed to take that question.
Very likely very similar age, and the rocks that host the deposit are very similar as well. It's also similar to some of the projects I've worked at in the past. For instance, further north of here, there's the Mount Poly project. When I was a geologist with Imperial Metals almost 20 years ago now, and that's another project that we put back into production there. I think that was in 2005. Similar host rocks, similar style of mineralization. So a lot of similarities to the other porphyries in this region.
And had MPD been picked up by previous, had it been recognized as a porphyry? I know I referred back to kind of February 2020 as kind of the alteration style, but was it thought of as being prospective for porphyries?
Well, it was interesting because prior to us picking up the project, I had the good fortune to do a site visit, because I think if I had just been given a stack of data and old reports, I probably wouldn't have been terribly interested. But there was exploration on the project going back to the 1960s by a number of different exploration companies, development type companies. And effectively, there was over 100 drill holes on the project. They all had copper mineralization in them. But what really struck me on the first site tour was, as you're going through a porphyry type system, you often see the copper oxides on surface. That didn't interest me. What interested me was that for many kilometers, we had a propylitic alteration style, and it was pretty obvious from some of the past drilling that the deeper they went into the project, the more they were seeing the type of potassic alteration that you'd like to see, and also better copper gold grades as well. So it was well known as a prospective porphyry project, but it wasn't until we sort of put 2 and 2 together and did some of that step out and deeper exploration that we went through that sort of nested porphyry type alteration system and began hitting the better copper gold grades.
When you say nested, you're talking about the kind of the classic Lowell and the Lowell shell with kind of an outer halo of propylitic alteration, then kind of more intense alteration in the middle. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, sort of the Russian doll model, where the outer envelopes are indicative of what the system is, but they're not heavily mineralized. And as you get to the right PT conditions and proximal to sort of these magmatic cupolas, you end up with the higher grade mineralization. And that's exactly what we see at the gate zone. And
so did you have to drill through? I mean, remind me of the depth, the kind of the top of the gate zone. Am I right? I think it's kind of around 200 to 300 meters kind of below surface when it really starts.
Yeah, when the better grading copper mineralization picks up from surface, though, you're often in sometimes 0.1 to 0.3% copper. Depends where you drill it. Obviously, there's some element of preferential orientations on mineralization. So occasionally you can get quite nice grading mineralization right to surface, but generally the higher grade material starting at 200-300 meters depth. And of course, we've drilled that down to nearly about 800 meters depth, and you're still in the system at that point.
And do you when you first look at this, do you think, as you're going through the drilling programs of 2020 and last year, do you think this is an open pit target, or are you targeting kind of potential block caving underground resources? I mean, is it too early to start thinking in those terms? Are you just looking at the geological endowment at this stage?
I would say at this stage, really, you can only speculate about how to mine, etc. Open pit underground. It's very early for that. We are still very much at exploration stage. It's all about discovery. We don't know yet whether we've hit the highest grade zones yet. We start to get a sense of the orientation of the mineralization we are looking at, but really it's still about exploration and discovery at this stage.
In the maps I've seen in your presentations, you've kind of got there are almost like two bounding faults, kind of north-south on the page. And in the most recent images you've got some IP, some geophysical data, which is suggesting there's some high-grade material kind of outside of that zone. Can you talk me through? I mean, perhaps it might be useful just to look at those maps to see, for me to understand what you're kind of meaning by the kind of controls of mineralization and what the latest geophysics has done. There we go. That's exactly the image I was thinking of.
This shows the gate zone, and these dotted lines here is approximately the corridor where we have drilled and intercepted mineralization. And the background is geophysical data from a survey we did last year in autumn. And we were very pleased with the results of the survey because we saw we do see a very close correlation between high conductivity, which are these red pink zones on the map, and high-grade mineralization in our drill holes. So you see these lines, which are grade shells here in the northern part of the area we drilled. That's where we intercepted high-grade mineralization. Also in the southern part, and less so in the middle. That's where we got lower grades. And the geophysical data very much corroborates what we see in the drilling. In the area where we got lower grades, we have lower conductivity, and the higher conductivity zone curves around to the east. So very easy to see where we are drilling next, where we are drilling at the moment as we speak. Actually, we will drill further east and test along this high conductivity anomaly. And what's very encouraging also is that really we only have drilled a very small part of the anomaly so far. And there's a lot more to drill, so a lot more potential for more high-grade mineralization. And the anomaly extends to the northeast, it extends to the southwest. So lots more drilling to be done and lots more potential to make the gate zone much bigger than it is now.
Okay, thank you, Claudia. When I look at the screen and I see the two vertical, kind of almost north-south lines, dashed lines, are those structural contacts that can be mapped, or faults that can be mapped in the field? Is that the basis for those lines?
They outline the area approximately where we have drilled so far, the area over which we have intercepted mineralization. But
what took you to that specific corridor? I mean, is it a distinctive geology? Is it a distinctive alteration feature at the surface? Is it, what?
Go to another map, which shows a little bit different information. You see here
geochemistry.
Geochemistry. Yes.
The background here is the surface, a surface anomaly, copper in soils, this pink area. And that was very much what guided our drilling so far, or one of the key inputs into our drilling. We essentially drilled along this anomaly and tested it. That's sort of how we progressed so far, and that's sort of what is behind this area where we've drilled and intercepted mineralization so far. And yeah, as I mentioned, sort of now we have this new geophysical data, and we'll test further along the underlying geophysical anomaly.
Do you have glacial till, and is it transported here?
Basically in situ, Merlin. So the drill work that we did correlated very well in bedrock copper versus what you see in soils above it, at least in that area. So there is till on the project, but not around the gate zone. Well, there is, but not in those areas that we're drilling.
Okay, it was interesting because the copper doesn't line up with the geophysics, if you know what I mean. There's a definitely kind of higher response to the geophysics conductivity. It was a conductivity, wasn't it, on map to the east? And was you in your material you talk about you've got a kind of a headline drill hole which was 535 meters at 0.49% copper and 0.29 gold. Was that in the kind of the northern portion, in that kind of the bit that kind of intersected the underlying geophysics?
I'd look at it like the geophysics here. There's probably a large pyritic shell adjacent to the copper mineralization. It's to flank it and be well developed on that east side. There's also some late structure that goes through. It doesn't seem to displace very much, but there is some clay in that structure. And in that sense, it would also generate a response. But I think what we're looking here is some of the drilling that we're going to be doing is going to target the edges of that big conductivity anomaly, because that's where we see in the gate zone the copper mineralization well developed.
So you'll be particularly looking on the western edge of that horseshoe
for initial drilling. Yeah, although over time you have to drill fences across and see just how closely it duplicates what we saw at gate. There
is that old saying, isn't it, that IP stands for indicates pyrite?
That's what I think as well. I've done a lot of that drilling in my past, and it's usually around the big chargeability anomalies that you want to be targeting, not directly at the middle of them.
Yeah. I've drilled some fantastic chargeability anomalies and had some technical success. We found a lot of metal, but not much of it paid.
Yeah.
To the southeast, I mean, so stepping right across that image further to the southeast, you highlighted a kind of a second array of drill targets. What's your thinking on where you are in the system, as opposed to, for those targets?
Well, I'll step into that a little bit, and I don't know if Claudia has the slides, but some of the work that we've done has suggested a very deep-seated center to the system, which would be kind of in the middle of this image, and that would be down a couple kilometers below the levels that we're really looking at. but it does imply sort of a concentric system. And that means that target that we're looking at there on the eastern side, again, perhaps drill the western flank of it and see if we get a duplication of the copper adjacent to the chargeability. It is early in terms of having this data and just beginning to drill test it now. So, but we do see evidence of a larger sort of multi-kilometer deep-seated porphyry type system with these copper zones that are coming up sort of, ringing it effectively.
Right. As kind of polyphase, multi-phase kind of system, or back to the Russian doll analogy, or too early to say?
It is too early to say. We do see some really interesting features, like you see the evolution of the intrusions over time. There's some late monzonitic intrusions which cut across the mineralization, and early dioritic intrusions which seem to be more closely associated with the mineralization. So you go from that diorite to monzonite sort of transition. You can visually see the enrichment in time and sort of the potassium content and other features that you would expect to see. So it seems like it has been multi-phase. Looking at the rock, it's quite interesting because you see very strong evidence of multiple pulses of hydrothermal fluid interaction with the rock. So, typical porphyry veining, but then, very intense copper mineralization with sort of this silicification. We have some pictures of that on our website, and some really interesting features as well, which I've never seen before, quite frankly, but like disseminated bornite in the host rock mats, which is quite interesting because it doesn't occur really with much in the way of veining or silicification, but it grades pretty well because it's bornite based, and you often miss it. When you first drill bornite, it hasn't oxidized yet, so it's sort of a brownish, unremarkable color, and then once it sits there and is exposed to the air, all those sort of peacock colors come out over time. So we've seen this really interesting sort of disseminated bornite mineralizations. We get down to certain depths in the system. So there's a lot to learn here, but there's a lot here which we find typical, and a lot which is also unusual, and that's typical geology. These deposits all reflect each other, but they don't form an exact duplicate either.
It's always humbling, isn't it? You go in thinking that you know quite a lot, and you come out realizing how little I do anyway, how little I know. So you're drilling 25,000 meters this year. How would you describe, the kind of the allocation of that budget? How much is kind of gentle step outs, kind of expanding your known resource, advancing that, and how much is kind of growth drilling? How much is infill and how much is expansion, kind of, or hunting for new targets?
Well, we have started on the gate zone. That's where currently one drill is turning. And we will soon add a second drill, and that'll also be in the gate zone area. And we'll then also test this second anomaly, this parallel lookalike anomaly 600 meters to the east of the gate zone. So that's what will be our main focus in the first half of the year. Then in the summer and second half of the year, we also have other targets on the property on our list for drilling. Let me just bring up a map and show where we will be going. So we were here up in the northwestern corner. The yellow star is the gate zone, and we have other target areas which have been historically drilled, very shallow, but never tested deeper, just like the gate zone before we started. That's up here, Man and Dillard. That's approximately 2 kilometers or so away from gate. And we have also targets down here, also previously drilled in the Axe part of our property. So several other targets that, like gate, have copper and gold near surface, but no deeper drilling. And those targets we want to test this year as well. And that's going to happen more in the later part of the year.
Okay. And so I can see on that graphic there, there's historic drilling down to around about 350 meters below the surface, and that the topography rises to the east with Dillard. So gate is potentially more eroded if everything got up to the same lithostatic pressure at the time that it was in place. Dillard looks if it's got some nice high grade at surface, and it's a big superficial feature. Do you rank your the surface expression with the amount of alteration with the mapping, or are you just going to kind of go through systematically and test each of them?
Yeah, I think there's always a risk of like everything you've said is spot on, Merlin. You can see the topography rises to the east, and there's the equivalent. The equivalent has not been tested at any of these other targets. I think, though, effectively we just need to be systematic. Like with the image you can see on the screen, there's a number of targets across the project. It's actually, if we had a full target list, over a dozen targets, which all have evidence of porphyry copper-gold mineralization. So we should put test holes into every target, make sure we understand where we sit in the system. It was actually core from Dillard that I first looked at while prospecting on the project, and that had it was largely propylitic, but you can see some of the deeper holes on there had that potassic alteration, and you can see the silica veining with porphyry style. You get the medial copper mineralization within the silica veins, like typical porphyry features. So that just is a target which is quite substantial in terms of a soil anomaly. There may be some glacial transport in that area, which has effectively attenuated the surface anomaly, but there is drilling over hundreds of meters, which does show porphyry copper gold mineralization. So we know the system's there. So I don't want to get too fixated on any particular target. I think we need to systematically test them and like we did at Gate, let the data guide the exploration program, sort of follow that sort of concentric or zoned porphyry style alteration, and just make sure we're testing all of the targets. There's the budget in the company how to do it, and certainly like our partners and biggest shareholders, Teck Resources, it's what gets them excited is once we had proof of concept with the higher grade mineralization at depth at Gate. So there's a concept that we need to test that same concept across the property, because just generally compared to other deposits in the area, it does look like there's less erosion at the MPD project. So more preservation of the complete system in the ground, and more of the surface exposure is in that propylitic facies. So we do need to systematically test all these targets before we overly fall in love with any one of them. As wonderful, as great as Gate is as an initial discovery, it may not even be the main center on the project. We simply don't know yet, right? Yeah.
I mean, just looking at the footprint of Dillard, I mean, the alteration, the volume of altered rock sitting above it seems to be larger than the one at Gate. You just have to be systematic, and it may be the one that has the smallest that provides you can never can tell. There's
exactly thinking about certain analogies in Australia, for instance. You can think about these pencil porphyry systems, and very nice enriched copper mineralization above them, and some of those anomalies on the Axe project, which we added on last year, that has really physical lookalikes to what we see at the Gate zone, and good initial prospecting results from those areas as well. So again, you do need to test across the entire MPD and property package.
Have you looked at the green rock vectoring, kind of the chlorite the chlorite fluid inclusion stuff?
Well, yeah, we've begun to do work on that now, actually, and it's quite interesting, because back when I was with Imperial Metals, some of that would have been newer work, but we've been the rocks with various consultants over the last year, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out.
So we're just about to kick off a couple of programs of that down in Ecuador. And I was talking to, in fact, Claudia, do you remember on that panel that we were with, Allocation Resources, they had used that green rock vectoring very successfully on the Boda porphyry. Sorry, was it? And it was Staveley. It was I think it was Chris Cairns at Staveley was working on that, but maybe Boda as well. But anyway, it seems to be quite a good thing with the fluid inclusions in the chlorites. I think they use the strontium and the terbium ratios, and they give you a kind of a straight line distance to the hydrothermal heart of the system, and you effectively get a 3D bubble around that. And when that intersects with a whole bunch of others, you can point to the porphyry center. Although it does get complicated when you've got many centers, like you appear to have where you are, because you get interference on the. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you get. lots of cross signaling, cross messaging, but they're clever boys, these scientists. Geophysics. So that's kind of the Green Rock Vectoring's one tool. Have you got regional magnetic survey across the whole area?
We have various generations of data. We've done some airborne work as well. So we do have data that crosses the project. And part of it was trying to reconcile historical databases with what we've collected as well. We've also done ground-based geophysics recently too. So that's how we generated those sort of target maps that Claudia was showing early on. And
that's you describe it as 3D IP. And when you map that, when you integrate that with the kind of the magnetic data sets, is it giving you a good handle on structure and kind of subterranean morphology?
Yeah, generally speaking, yes, it's giving a pretty good indication of how things are laid out in 3D. Of course, we have to drill it to confirm, right?
Yeah, of course. That's the key step, the truth machine. Great. Well, how many of those other targets are you going to be able to drill this year?
Well, we've got Dillard, Man, and then targets down at Axe on our list. You know, as a geologist, the drilling always very much depends on how things are going, and our results will drive where we focus. So we certainly plan to test several other targets outside of Gate this year.
Yeah, and the good thing about porphyries is you have cubic kilometers of altered material, so you can get it's hard to miss.
Yeah, you're not drilling a gold vein system or something. You're drilling something literally the size of mountains.
yeah, exactly. So even if you don't get the mineralization, at least you can understand the intensity of the system, which can help you plan the next phase of work. So yeah, well, good luck with that. Can we talk a bit about Mohave? Or
yeah,
I mean, unless I have, is there more that is there more that we should cover off on MPD? Because I'm feeling relatively comfortable that you've got this kind of great potential. You've got the money to drill it. You've got the drilling plan, and the course of this year is going to kind of yield results both on MPD in the Gate zone, but also on the new targets as well. And so am I missing? You know, is it, tell me something else I haven't covered on MPD, or we can move on to Mohave.
I think you've summed it up very well, and we've covered the key points on MPD. MPD certainly will be the main focus of our work this year, where most of our drill effort will go. We have also planned a small maiden drill program on Mohave, our porphyry project in Arizona, which is in many ways a very similar project to MPD in that it's in a great location, very accessible. Arizona is copper country. There is a big copper mine, Baghdad, owned by Freeport, just 30 kilometers to our east. It's a very accessible project just off the highway. And like MPD, it has been explored in the past, has some drill results, some interesting smoke, but nobody has really figured it out yet. And so it's a very exciting project, and we are planning a small maiden drill program there, similar start to what we did at MPD 2 years ago.
How many meters? What does a small program count in your books?
About 1,500 meters approximately is what we have planned.
And is it like many parts of Arizona with transported gravels? I mean, have you got gravel cover over the top, kind of masking the geology, or can you actually map and see the rocks on the in outcrop?
I guess I'll take that question. You can actually see rocks in outcrop over about half the project. I think the eastern part does have a gravel lid on it, but I was last there, I think, about a dozen years ago now at this point, and you can see porphyry mineralization at surface over a portion of the project. You see other hints of some interesting brecciation, early, late breccia pipes, this kind of evidence that, again, you have multiple pulses of hydrothermal mineralization or alteration on the project. So, and some encouraging early results. Obviously, that's more on the calc-alkalic side of the porphyry spectrum than the alkalic side. It's sort of a copper, silver, moly type system based on the geography, but it does have encouraging early results, and we should figure out again where it sits in 3D space.
And if you went there a dozen years ago, how did it come into the portfolio, and what's the What's the genesis of the kind of the corporate side of that project?
It's actually a somewhat interesting story. Chris tried to acquire Mohave, when was it, Chris? In 2007 or so, quite a long time ago, looked at the project, visited it, and found it interesting. And at the time, another company paid more and acquired it. And then when we looked for copper projects for Kodiak 3 years ago, Chris remembered the project, and we looked, well, what has happened to the project? And it turned out that the company which had acquired it at the time was then acquired by Bluestone Resources, or became Bluestone Resources, which was a company in the Discovery Group, of which we are part.
Yeah.
And they were literally just 2 office doors down the road, down the hallway, sorry. So we knocked on their door and said, like, hey, do you still have this Mohave project? And they had, in the meantime, acquired a much larger, much more advanced gold project. So Mohave was really a non-core project to them, and we were then able to acquire it from them.
Fantastic. What a great story. So when are you going to go down there next, Chris?
Well, I've got a bit of time on my hands these days, having entered early retirement. So we'll just have to sort that out.
Yeah.
I think it will be sort of also later in the year, sort of second half of the year, that we'll get going on Mohave. So we're just starting with Indigenous consultations and the preparatory work, and then that will start turning. Fingers crossed in Q3, Q4.
Sorry, I completely failed to ask any questions on drill permits and how long it takes things and to get moving. So that's obviously a consideration in Arizona. You've got to go only as quickly as the permitting allows.
Yeah, we're permitted. We received our permits. So that's no hold up. We have all the permits in hand that we need to work.
And the Indigenous consultation, is that not a prerequisite for the permits, or is it just part of a kind of a parallel process that you've got to kind of work on the social license to operate, so to speak?
Yes, very much the latter. And it's just our approach to consult early. Before we start drilling, I would want to sit down with the tribes in the area and make sure that they don't oppose the project, that we have answered any questions they might have, that there is a working relationship. And that's what we did at MPD. We consulted with the First Nations in the area early on and made sure they are on board with our plans, and we will take the same approach in Arizona as well. There are lots of mining projects that didn't come to fruition because of local opposition or Indigenous opposition. And I think a way to address this risk is to just sit down right at the start and consult and engage with the local communities and just make sure everybody is on board with what's planned.
And they understand. I mean, we have exactly the same things down in Ecuador. On a new project, everyone's kind of up in arms that they don't want to mine, and it just takes a few months, a few weeks to explain that actually we're in the initial phases of geological investigation or exploration, and gradually everyone calms down, and they then are working in a trust relationship can grow from that base.
Yeah, our experience, certainly, particularly at MPD, there is that the First Nations in the area, they really understand mining, and they also understand the economic benefits and the business opportunities that come from an exploration project or a mine. So they are pro-mining. They just want to make sure that it's done the right way, that it's done with a minimal negative impact on the environment. And that's really why you then sit together. And they have very good input. They know the land very well, and they've given us some very helpful input how to look better after the fauna, after the water, and we take those suggestions and this input on board, and it makes it a better project.
I bet they've also been quite useful at if you kind of show them a breccia and say we're interested in this, I bet they've said, oh, there's some of that over there. They really know the countryside, they know the rocks.
Yes.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's slightly off topic, but the mining sector from the outside is often seen with such kind of harsh criticism. And yet, actually, when you're inside it, the projects can only survive when you've got that very close working relationship with your local community, and it's done on a day-by-day basis. Every successful exploration company is engaging constructively and positively with its local community if it wants to continue. It's something you absolutely have to do. Anyway, sorry, slightly off topic, slight rant. But thank you both very much. I really have got a much better understanding of what you're aiming to do this year and the kind of the scale of the mineralizing system at NPD. I absolutely didn't understand the kind of the regional nature of that project and the additional kind of porphyry potential of those multiple intrusions, and the fact that you're going to be testing them and doing more work on Gate this year. And I love a bit of Arizona. I hope that drilling goes well, and look forward to seeing the results that come out during the course of the year.
Thanks, Merlin. Great to speak with you today. Great to meet you, even if it's digitally, hopefully at some point in the flesh as well.
Look forward to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.